The other aspect of leadership that I'd like to spend a couple minutes on is something I refer to as eyes up. And I'm going to use a couple of non-business examples, actually kind of sports examples, to help illustrate what I mean by eyes up. And then I'll transition it to more of a business application. So I took up equestrian sports in my late 30s. I was living in England, and I was looking for something to do with my son that I didn't know how to do. I didn't want to be the all-knowing parent. I wanted to be the struggling parent with a struggling son learning a new sport. And by the way, he liked it a lot for a while, and then he moved on to other things. And I got hooked, and I eventually started pursuing the extreme sport version of equestrian called eventing, which is very high speed, multi-mile courses where you're jumping fixed objects like brick walls or fences and things like this. Why am I mentioning this? Because the most common and repeated coaching words of my coach, who remains a dear friend today, is eyes up, meaning don't focus on now, don't focus, rather focus on what's next, and the horse will too. If you're at high speed and you're approaching a jump and you look down, the horse will sense that. He'll hesitate, he'll look down, and now you're both going down. I've experienced that. So I'm speaking from authority, eyes up. Remarkably, some 20-something years later, or longer, I took up motorsports, meaning driving race cars. And I couldn't believe it. I have a coach. I've been doing this for not quite 4 years. I have a coach who's a pro race driver who, by the way, is 25. And it's very clear he's the teacher, I'm the student. Sometimes it's in the car. A lot of times it's in the pits or the sidelines, and he's watching very carefully. And I don't know how he does it, because I have a helmet on, I have a visor on, and I can hear in my earpiece him saying, eyes up, eyes up, eyes up. Somehow he's figured out where my line of sight is. Maybe it's the angle of my helmet. I'm not quite sure. But his whole focus is on fixating on a quarter mile out, a half mile out, because it mentally creates the motor skills that create your line. Your motor skills bring it about. If you're looking down, it just doesn't happen. And the final analogy I'd use is I had the opportunity to spend some time with Lindsey Vaughn. She was a speaker at a Pru event. And, you know, she's the most decorated female skier of all time. And we had about an hour chat in the green room waiting to go on for what we were both speaking at. And I was talking to her about what she does next. She was still competing at that time. And she told me she was dabbling in Formula One racing. And I thought, oh, wow, what's driving that? And she said, well, it's about speed. It's about adrenaline rush. It's about the line and the eyes. I know how to do that. And it's a very interesting phenomenon. You know, this may also be true, by the way, for an NFL quarterback with the eyes up sort of notion, or perhaps a soccer player. I don't know. So this whole notion of eyes up, I think, has application outside of sports. I think it actually has to do with business, because while it's important to focus on the details of getting your immediate task done, it is really dangerous to be fixated on looking at your feet or looking at your pencil. You need to be looking up and thinking about what's going on around you, the potential changes and forces at work, whether it's consumer behavior or competitive landscape or new technology or other new aspects that are changing the world, or the globalization. It's not just the here and now. And it's not just instincts and reflexes, as in the earlier examples. It's eyes up, especially for the leader. And in addition to that, it's not just eyes up to see what everyone else is doing and replicate it. You know, I have always found to be very cautious about accepting conventional wisdom. In terms of crisis, there tends to be a herd instinct. And herd instinct is safe from criticism, at least at the outset. But it rarely delivers the best outcomes. What's, I think, often better is to see what people are doing and saying, well, what do you have to believe to do the contrary, or to take a different form of action? More often than not, that exercise will take you to a different place. In the process, what's also necessary for that to happen is to tap diverse perspectives. You know, there's an old saying of you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, use them in proportion. I think there's a lot to be said for that. It's hearing what other people think, listening, and not necessarily adapting everything, but kind of putting them into your mental satchel and pondering it, thinking about it later, and asking yourself, what would be the contrary view? How do you think differently about this? And make up your mind about when you accept conventional thinking and when do you disregard it. And finding, perhaps more often than you think, that disregarding it is the best test. And what that does is cause you to think about options and alternatives very different than your competitive peers. And it can create also an incredible form of engagement among your team as you ultimately lock in.